Hello and welcome. We're so glad to have you with us, whether you are with us live or watching the replay. My name is Imran, and I am excited to be hosting this Edpuzzle live event. One of many where we will be discussing and learning about best practices in teaching and learning. So firstly, a bit about myself. I'm with the Edpuzzle community team. And before this, I was an educator for 15 years. I was teaching chemistry and I was overseeing EdTech at my school. So I have a guest with me today. He is Fahmie Ali Abdat. He's a senior teacher of history. I'm going to tell you a bit more about him. He's based in Singapore. He started out in 2008 upon completing his teacher training at Singapore's National Institute of Education. And prior to that, he read history at the National University of Singapore. Now, just a bit more about him. He has simple beliefs in regard to education. Firstly, that teachers need to be able to help students learn a particular concept or skill in at least 3 different ways. And secondly, that something is wrong if you step into class and you are not excited about what you have planned to teach. And so new technologies help with both of these things, according to Fami. So I'm going to bring on Fami and say hi. So welcome, Fami. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi, Imran. Thank you for the introduction. Right.
Yeah, tell us more about yourself.
Sure. All right. So I think the first thing I need the viewers or the audience to know is that this is the first time I'm doing this. So please do bear with me. And I do hope to actually learn from your comments and from any questions you have along the way. I think just to add on, I've been teaching at the same school for over a decade. And really, one of the things that I learn most from is through collaboration with fellow educators, whether it's locally or internationally. Yeah, so I think that's enough about me, I guess. Yeah.
That's awesome. I think we look forward to what you have to share with us. I'm going to play a short game just to hear a bit more about your experience. And maybe you've played this game before. It's two truths and one lie. And what's going to happen is you're going to share 3 statements. And I'm going to guess which one is the lie out of the 3. Right? So any 3 statements. And then I'll try to analyze them and let you know which I think is not quite true. Okay, so go ahead. First statement would be...
Okay, so you mentioned just now I'm an EdTech enthusiast. So during remote learning, I was quick to pounce and tried many different types of new EdTech tools to entertain and engage my students. I over-prepare, especially during remote learning. Let's say if I'm allocated an hour, I would prepare work for 2 hours. And last is, I look forward to synchronous lessons, to have some FaceTime at least with my students when we have remote learning.
Okay, I think I missed out on the first statement. The first statement was what again?
No, I use, during remote learning, I use a lot of new EdTech tools. Just to keep them interested, engaged. Yeah.
Okay, so the first statement is new EdTech tools. I think for a lot of us educators, that's what we were doing. We saw the need to try new things. So I don't think that sounds like a lie. The second one is about over-preparation. I think when we are new to remote learning, that's also quite true for myself, quite true for a lot of educators. And the last one is you look forward to synchronous teaching and learning. Is that right?
That's right.
Wow. I think all 3 sound very, very feasible as teachers. I'm going to go ahead and say is the third one. The third one is the lie, that you look forward to synchronous teaching and learning. Am I right?
All right. Okay. I like how you rationalize everything. So you put in the reason there. Actually, I do look forward to FaceTime with them. I think as much as we prepare the lessons offline and we are we are doing a lot of back end work during remote learning, but really that opportunity to look at them, and I think it was something that can re-energize me during that lockdown period.
I see. Okay,
so the lie. What's the lie? The lie. You wanna go again, or should I just reveal?
Yes, please go ahead, because it's I don't know. I think all seem quite reasonably believable.
Yeah, I tried to throw you off a bit by linking the lie to something you mentioned in the intro, which is that I'm an EdTech enthusiast. So actually, I didn't use any new tools. Reason because whatever that I have already introduced to my students, I kept it at that. I was worried that they would be flooded with new technology, so they have a new environment, new technology. So the fear was that they will be overwhelmed. So I kept to what I knew quite well, and what more importantly, what they knew quite well. Yeah.
That's a very interesting perspective, because in the past couple of years, especially when we have had a lot more remote learning, a lot of the educators I knew, they just threw everything at their class and tried to see what worked and what didn't. So that is part of what we're going to be talking about today. And I'm going to time travel a little. 2 years ago, sometime in April, I was sitting in the car park of a shopping mall. Right. What I was doing is I was sending out questionnaires and surveys to all the students in my school, asking them whether they had their own device, whether they had high-speed broadband. And the reason was that with very short notice, we found out that we were going to have full remote learning, because suddenly everybody had to stay at home. So what came out of that was that I found out who are the students in my school who didn't have their own devices, who didn't have high-speed broadband. And we have come a long way since then. We have come to realize what the inequalities are, for example, and I'm hoping to learn more of this from you. So take it away. Share with us, what have you found out about how students have been learning from home, and what teachers can do to help them along the way?
All right. Okay. So thank you. I think essentially this interest is the interest is piqued in me because really that whole experience of remote learning for me, at least, that was something new and exciting, and it provided a challenge actually for me. That's how I viewed things, and through the experience later on, I realized that there was this blind spot in how I've been engaging with my students, in that actually I know very little as to what they do at home, and whether it's remote learning, whether it's they're at home, when we are meeting face to face. I don't know enough to make more informed decisions. Yeah. So with that, okay, just a quick rundown of some of the things that our conversation will take us to today. So the literature, what researchers are saying about inequalities, all right, and then my own experience, what I did about it, and then things that I hope to be doing in time to come. Right. Okay, so the literature surrounding the inequalities that could have been perpetuated due to remote learning. So, and if you were to look at the materials out there, there was intense research, within a matter of months, because really there were things that we possibly knew beforehand, but really that whole experience of remote learning, at least in Singapore, revealed certain things about teaching and learning, all right, and that as much as we have a lot of technology to support us, there will be this occurrence of I'm just going to go to the next slide. Yeah, the digital divide. So these are the words that were thrown in the literature about inequalities, right? And maybe it's time for me to maybe just ask for Imran, any of these particular words or phrases resonate with you?
I think one thing that I didn't think would be a problem would be the digital deficit, but I'm not sure whether it means what I think it means. I think when suddenly we had to carry out pedagogy online, and then we have to make certain assumptions regarding what students can and cannot do. And perhaps some of them, they don't have the know-how on how to do certain things, but online. I'm not sure whether that's what digital deficit means. Maybe you could share with me whether I'm wrong or correct.
Okay. So essentially, when we look at what's out there, the educators were referring to something quite similar, whereby there is genuine concern that the remote learning experience perpetuated certain inequalities. And as educators, I think myself personally, I'm a big believer that education is this great social equalizer. So it worries me when I learn that, okay, this remote learning experience is counterintuitive, or is doing something that goes against what I strive to do. So digital divide, whether it's disparity, deficit, exclusion, gulf, disenfranchise, essentially these educators were worried that if other educators are not aware that these were possible consequences, then they will not react appropriately. Okay, so just some I took it upon myself to look at articles from across different localities. So there are articles from America, Africa, and Europe. So the first one, whereby essentially the research pointed to the fact that during remote learning, the minorities are disproportionately affected. Okay, I think most of the researchers are operating from their own context, so this would be possibly an existing area of concern for them. And they found that the remote learning experience impacted certain communities a lot more, right? Therefore, for them, that would be essentially research is to try and inform educators to look into it, to try and see what could be done to minimize this impact. The second example, average learning loss. So this was an example from Netherlands, whereby they were actually looking at, and this is quite interesting, whereby what was the impact on families or students who have parents who are more educated as opposed to parents who are less educated. How did this possible support structure impacted the learning experience when they were at home? Right. So certain things we do know quite instinctively, but from what I understand, the percentage was about a 55% average learning loss as compared to the average of about 20% learning loss. So if a child came from a less educated home, within that year, they actually lost about 55% worth of what they would have experienced had they been in school. And the average was about 20%. All right. And the last example I have is from an article in Africa, whereby they were monitoring the impact on students who actually relied on loan equipment and how they performed when they came back. So essentially, when they are relying on loan equipment, and this could include broadband as well. This could include, of course, the laptops. So having given them the device, having tried to support them, most of the time, the teachers would end the support there. But statistically speaking, those who had that, while it would have been far more devastating if they didn't have it in the first place, really the students fared poorer in the test. Yeah.
That is very surprising. I wouldn't have expected that, because I think that's what happened for across countries. Like they realize, okay, some people don't have devices, let's try to get devices to them. So I think the intent was to make sure that everybody had access. So this study results really stood out as something I wouldn't have expected. But okay, let's hear more from you.
So just to pull, having looked at a few more articles, some of the common causes that do overlap, which I think is important as much as the data that, all these numbers are at times discouraging. I think for us, the interest would be, what can we do to mitigate, to mediate, to make it a bit better? So understanding the causes, I thought was quite important. And one is these low levels of self-efficacy, whereby in general, students, who possibly come from less underprivileged homes, whether they were reliant on loan out equipment, there were quite low levels of self-efficacy, which I come to understand, whereby they were less able to manage their learning on their own. These are students who tend to be a bit more reliant with the teachers managing, how much work they need to do for homework, at what point of time. Students who perhaps are more comfortable with staying behind in school to consolidate learning. So over the 3 case studies, low levels of self-efficacy would be one area. or one possible cause. Lack of instructional support, I think, played out in the second example a bit more, whereby they were really looking at students whose support network at home isn't as strong. All right. This could be because the parents themselves not familiar with what goes on in school, not familiar with the technology, right? Not familiar with really what is there that they could possibly do to support their child, right? And the third possible cause that's quite common would be the pandemic effects on family dynamics, whereby because the remote learning experience occurred at the same time of a pandemic, whereby there'll be people fearing for their health, people fearing for more, basic things like income, employment, and how this actually impacted certain communities a lot more. So much so that their remote learning experience would have been really compromised because of other circumstantial aspects. Yeah. So for me, there's when I look at the causes, there are things that I feel like, okay, I'm in a position to help them in this area at least. And that's the first one, low levels of self-efficacy. So later on, when you see what I tried to do with my students, it had a bit more to do with that particular cause.
And a lot of these reasons due to family dynamics, sometimes they are invisible. Sometimes there are things that as educators we're not aware of unless we proactively reach out to the students. And even then, it's sometimes not possible. Sometimes you have dozens and dozens of students, and it's a bit tricky to be able to find out the detailed background and circumstances behind each one. So that is definitely a challenge.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I agree with that. Given the most of these problems are adult problems that teachers we can't really solve for the child. At best, we can do is try to insulate them. But how do we, that was the go-to solution as far as possible for most teachers, to insulate them. But during remote learning, it's a lot more complicated to insulate them from problems within the households. Yeah. Okay, so I'll move on to observations, or essentially what I experienced during that. You mentioned April 2 years ago. Feels like a long time when you say 2 years ago, but it's actually not that long. So the experience I had, I categorize it into two. One is more student related, the other one is teacher related. So the first one is onboarding, the experience of getting students equipped with the tools, the equipment. So things like you mentioned, checking on the students who has a device, but possibly a sharing device, which would be a problem. You have bandwidth, but can it support if your parents are also tapping on the same bandwidth? So things like that, the more technical aspects. Okay, but for me, my main area of concern at that time would be to get them onto a platform whereby we can engage them on a consistent basis, so that whenever they feel lost, which they will feel lost, which they will feel at some point of time, they will have a common point. For us, we have a virtual learning space in Singapore, the SLS, which would be the common point whereby we tend to give out instructions through that. And from what I understand, certain countries where there's no common reference point, it could be a problem, because at times the students just need one place to go to get all the information, to get all the experiences that they would need to learn for that day. Yeah. So onboarding, for me personally, because of my interest in using certain edtech tools, so I did feel that I was, in a sense, a bit more prepared, because when I'm using certain tools, I have I've done one round of troubleshooting with the kids, so they know what is expected of them, and they know how to solve smaller problems that could come along the way. Yeah, and once they are there, then the students learning. This is the tricky part. I put there 4 quadrants, so I have like my own way of categorizing my students, not a very scientific way. Essentially, I looked at students who appear fine, and later we are able to confirm that they are genuinely fine. That means they are emotionally coping with the learning. So that's one category, appear fine and truly are fine. Then you have students who actually, they appear fine, but they are not actually coping very well. And they tend to pass, under the radar a bit, okay, because when we are checking on them, they're able to give all the correct answers. When they are tasked to submit work, they're able to still give quality answers. But we have no idea where they got the answers from. When we do a quick scan, it looks okay. But when it's remote learning, there's no chance to really question further at times. You just see the end product, it looks okay, the essay looks fine, and you move on. Then we have appear not fine. Okay, they appear to be struggling, but actually they are okay. I had a few students like this. The reason why they appear not fine, but they actually fine is because within as they spend more and more time with remote learning, they seem to have switched time zones. So essentially, they just tell you very openly. They say that, oh, actually we stay up all the way until our morning call with you, and then if there's no synchronous lessons, they'll catch up on sleep. So you at times look at them, they look like they are so tired in the morning. You're wondering, like, are things okay? They are always submitting work late. It turns out they are just operating in a different time zone. Right? Imran would be quite familiar with time zones now. Now he's working with people from all over the world. But my students, they should only be following the Singapore time zone, but they were not. And the last one would be, they appear struggling and they are struggling. And these are the ones I guess we catch on a bit more. So this was the experience for me, for my students. In terms of with teachers, right? I think the morale fluctuates. There'll be moments whereby we are really struggling. We are trying to find solutions to new problems that have emerged, and really the importance of your support network within the school. And as teachers, we have also been operating our support network is our little corner in the staff room or certain school canteen, and we didn't have that. So it's also a trying period. We want to try new things, but to discuss new technology online and things are moving very fast, it was quite difficult. And then lastly, my experience of collaboration, what I also recognize, like for me, when I was engaging with my students, I realized that, okay, because of experiences from before, my students are coping reasonably well. So I was thinking about like my colleagues from other schools, other history teachers, right? How would they be coping with this new circumstance, this new context of learning? And so I took it upon myself to try and engage with them. So we opened WhatsApp groups, and eventually I set up a group for history teachers, because essentially the idea is we want to crowdfund quality lesson ideas, something we've tried, something that we can export, something that we can share with our colleagues elsewhere, so that they save time, so that they can move on and invest their time into other more immediate concerns. Yeah, so this was something that I thought it was quite neat. So we had a Facebook group whereby teachers just, okay, I tried this in my class for this chapter. If you're teaching the same chapter, then go ahead, you can give it a try. It's a bit different from collaborating with your own teachers within the same school, because within the same school, there's a high possibility that you are looking at resources for one particular level, and then you divide and conquer that kind of approach. Yeah, but what I was trying to solve would be if there are 30, 40, 50 other teachers creating the same digital content for that same topic, then surely we can collaborate as much as possible, or just exchange ideas for that matter, to build on each other's work. Yeah, so this was the whole remote learning experience for me.
I quite like that last part, because I think for a long time, I think a lot of us were merely surviving. But you can only be relying on survival mode for so long, because it is quite exhausting to just live from day to day and week to week. But what I'm hearing is, by looking out for opportunities like this, where you can work with many other educators, you're trying to see how you can thrive in the mid to longer term. And I think that requires some really forward thinking. So I think kudos to that.
It's mainly circumstantial, because I think a few months before that, I attended network learning community. So I already unknowingly, I was making friends from other schools teaching the same subject. So when the opportunity arose to just leverage on these things and find a way to help one another, then I think that's where the idea came about. All right. So this was the experience, and essentially intervention came in the form of, all right, they are back in school. I think it was sometime in term 3 of 2020. All right. And knowing that, okay, there were whispers of this digital divide. Okay, there was some education, there was some discourse surrounding it. And of course, for us, essentially, the dust has somewhat settled. The students are coming back, and then you are really trying to have a sensing of where your students are at in terms of learning, in terms of their social emotional issues. So it was actually a very just as challenging as the entire remote learning experience was. And the context was at that point of time, term 3 is sometime in July. The idea was that we are not out of the woods yet. At any point of time, we could be asked to conduct lessons remotely again. Therefore, what can I do in the meantime to actually strengthen their competencies? And for me, one of the things I identified would be something along the lines of self-management, which literature points to self-efficacy. All right, so first one, reintroduction. I quickly recognize that as much as I take attendance of my students in the morning to do a visual check, once they end call, end meeting, and they complete the assignments, I have very little knowledge of what actually they are doing. So I actually decided to, all right, I gave out a Google form and I asked a bunch of questions to just find out how that remote learning experience was like. So I asked them about what time do they do their work, what time they feel most energetic to do their work, what physical space are they using when they're doing HBL, do they have space to do HBL, who do they turn to when they run into problems, and how do they actually check how the day was like for themselves, like are they coping well, do they need to sound out to someone? So essentially to understand what goes on in at home for my students, right? And it was something I think, honestly speaking, I didn't think about that before the remote learning experience, but now I felt that it's something I need to know, because in understanding your students better will, no matter what, will definitely make you better in supporting their learning. So this was where I found out about them saying that, actually a few of us, we have already found a way of coping, and that is we will stay up. That's why you will never find us late for our morning call, because we didn't even fall asleep. So okay. Then they will just set an alarm for the first synchronous lesson. Maybe it's later at 10 in the afternoon. They will catch up on sleep. And at night they will.
I wonder what our fellow educators have to say about this. We have, looking at the comments, we have people from the Philippines, from Singapore, from Guam. So welcome. Whether you're on YouTube Live or on Facebook, thanks for joining us. So what my personal belief was that is that remote learning is a chance for students to exercise some agency. So if they decide, okay, I'm gonna schedule my day like this, where in your example, I'm gonna stay up, right? And I'm gonna stay up really late, and then in the morning I'm gonna do something, and then after that I'm gonna sleep the whole day. But they had the choice to be able to do that, and I think in and of itself that's already quite powerful. I do think that some other educators might not feel likewise. So if you have something to say about this, please type in the chat, type in the comments. Let us know what you think about how this unstructured or freely structured remote learning could be beneficial to students or not in terms of exercising the agency. In the meantime, go ahead. I think we were on one of the points later on.
Yeah, and just to add on, I do agree that their own recognition of when they thrive is quite important, as well as they transition to being adults. At times, it's important for them to know that, okay, I can deal with complex tasks at this time, whereas at certain times of the day I'm better suited to just doing more maybe the more menial tasks and whatnot. And actually that's a process of learning about yourself, which I think is actually quite powerful. I think a lot of us, as adults, we recognize certain sweet spots of the day whereby we are more creative, whereby we are more productive. Yeah. So they were able to learn that. The worry was that when they are coming back to school, how well can they adjust? How fast can they adapt? Yeah. Okay. So the next thing I did was to find out how students consolidate what they learn. So essentially, again, the interest is to find out what they do when they are learning or when they think they are learning, right? And you can see that there are certain students who are more in tune or more attuned to what a particular subject or particular discipline actually needs, right? So a very simple activity whereby I think I used a Padlet to get them to key in. All right, I gave them a scenario. You are studying for a test that's in a week's time for history. What do you do? So you see the variety of responses. Some of them will give you the usual ones like, okay, I'll be reading the textbook. Some would be revising notes. Some would be making flashcards. So you do recognize that their concept of what learning is, what studying is, differs. And this would mean that what they do, during the remote learning, essentially it could be that how do they check that they are coping with a particular new concept? Would be that maybe they just watch the video lesson again and again and again and again. They don't change the activities which is important for them to actually process the information, right? So, and it so happened that at this point of time, I was also quite interested in this book written by Scott Young and James Clear called Ultra Learning. So he talks a bit about meta learning map. So I thought to myself, all right, what do I know about my own subject? What's the meta learning map for my own subject? How do I impart this little, nuggets of information about learning itself? How much do my students know that for different subjects, the skills needed or the activities needed for them to excel are quite different, right? So of course my focus would still be for my subject, but what I went on to do after I figured out what they tend to do at home would be to role model different ways to process information. So in the meta learning map, you have facts, content, procedural knowledge. So I will get them to, I'll tell them, okay, what do we do when we are learning new content? What can be done to process the information? What does it look like? Whether it's creating mind maps, we'll start doing more of these things in class. Then I can share with them that this is what processing information looks like. When it comes to procedural knowledge, if you are working on a particular skill, what would it look like when you are trying to improve on this particular skill? It's not the same for each domain of that particular subject. So I did more of this in class. So they would do activities like they would teach one another, and I would say that, okay, if you are at home and you just attended a video lesson, and you could just bug your sibling or bug your parents. I think parents won't be happy to hear, but you just can try to share what you learned with them. And if you're able to explain it to them, then if you can teach, means you've internalized it quite at a deep level. Yeah. So I gave them these little activities for them to try in case we go into remote learning again, and they need activities to do with the people around them. All right, because they don't have they may not necessarily have classmates to discuss. Yeah, but later on, I will share that there were things I did to also tell them that actually they can form their own study groups online. No one's stopping them from doing that. They were under this impression that they can only Zoom with the teachers. They can't Zoom amongst themselves. Only the teacher can arrange for a Zoom. So they were quite surprised to find out that there were students who were actually having their own study sessions at night. Yeah, and it was organized by one or two of them who realized that they need that interaction. So they formed that group, and they were able to be their own support network. And other students may not know about that, and they are missing out on something. Yeah. And the last thing was to simulate remote learning. So yeah, it may at times look as though like it's just a teacher because they had their PLDs, and instead of choosing to engage with them physically, I made them do an online lesson.
Yeah, PLDs
But what?
are personal
Oh,
learning
yes.
devices. Yeah.
But yeah, so over in my school, the students each have their personal learning device. So I wanted to see actually how they operate when they are engaged with content online and on their own. So I wanted to see whether how are they coping with it. Can they actually sit through when, after how many minutes do I see them being distracted? After how many minutes do they start being disengaged? How attentive can they be with watching a video? Right, things like this, whereby when we were doing the remote learning, we were simply uploading a lesson, and then unfortunately we may only see them once a week for that particular week, and all we gather from them are quality data, but there were things that we couldn't see with our own eyes, how the students are reacting and responding. So I actually made sure that every single class I had, they will try one of the digital lessons, but this time around I'm there. And I wanted to see what type of questions they were going to ask, because now that I'm there, they didn't have that option. Yeah. So with that, I was hoping to understand how my own students cope with remote learning. So in any case, if we are thrown into that situation again, I can possibly prepare materials that are better suited for them. Minimally that, yeah.
So Fahmi, if we rewind a little, just now when you were sharing about meta learning, where you got your students to think about how they were learning or how they think they were learning, what occurred to me was the reason you did that, you had that exercise, or maybe you had a few of those exercises, was that you realized that you needed to do it because of the remote learning experience. But what's powerful about that is it's a totally win-win situation, because it is also going to be very impactful even for in-person teaching and learning. Getting students to really dig deep and think about exactly how they're processing information and data and knowledge is something that can be applied to in-person learning as well as remote learning. So it's something that it's going to be beneficial regardless of whether your school will go back to remote learning.
Yeah, because when okay, so maybe it's a good time to turn to the next slide. So I also had this particular. I was influenced by one of these books. I think this was by John Hattie, about assessment capable visible learners. So okay, it's a thick book, a lot of great ideas. So I just picked out a few things that I thought can work on or tackle this issue of self-efficacy. How do I make my students more take ownership of their learning? Okay, given that is for me personally, I believe that we have them in schools to actually help them learn about how they learn, so that they can always replicate this in time to come. So if at the end of my 2 years with them, 4 years with them, the only thing they learn about history is the content, then I would see that I failed them. I want them to be able to transfer whatever learning strategies they have. You should give them the confidence and the competence to learn anything they want to in future. Yeah. So these are some qualities that I pick out to try and get them to be better at managing their learning. So knowing their current level of understanding. So there's some ideas there. I won't read out to you specifically. I'll just talk about the qualities, because I think big ideas, teachers can actually run away with it quite easily. So, and in this, I'm very sure these are things that a lot of educators already know, but I put it there for myself as a reminder, because sometimes so I stick this right in front of where I sit, and just reminders at times that I forget to do these things. Then I get a healthy reminder. So number one is to know their current level of understanding, and for them to know where they are in terms of their own level of understanding. At times we know where they are, but they are not very sure. To understand where they are going and have confidence to take on the challenge. I think confidence to take on. I'm a big believer in expecting more from my students, and when we have that expectation on them, most of the time they will not want to disappoint you. You will want to work towards what you see in them actually. Yeah. So to give tiered assessments, to give them this confidence that at times they are not able to do something is possibly because our assessment wasn't tiered correctly for them. Okay, you expected them to do something at a higher level when they needed to start something at a lower level to build that efficacy. The third one is to select tools to guide their learning. All right, so this is the one whereby I teach students how to practice or study, what it looks like. So I would spend time with the class, teaching them how to make flashcards. If it's just a strategy, I'm certain that it doesn't work for every single student, but just to get them to experience it for themselves and decide, is this something that can help me, learn a new content or consolidate my learning, so that they have a follow-up activity once they try something new. The fourth quality, to seek feedback and recognize that errors are opportunities to learn. I think, again, these are just healthy reminders for me. So some of the things I did quite a bit would be to create feedback opportunities. So self-assessment, peer assessment. These were things in my class because I wanted them to gain that ownership of checking on their learning, and that they're able to do so. And that every time feedback is given is just a cycle to actually close a particular learning gap. And last one, recognize their learning and teach others. Self-assessment and activities that promote peer learning. Again, the idea that friends can have a healthy discussion about what they have learned, and then and just close a particular learning gap if need be, or just when they discuss and when they rephrase certain things that were taught in class in their own words, and that's actually them internalizing already. Yeah. So this was something that I did throughout the year, not specifically about with regards to remote learning, but I did feel that when I looked at these things that I did, certainly it supported my students in being a bit more or having more self-efficacy. Yeah. Okay, so anything you want to ask? Because there's a lot of information here.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, so
I think
if there's
I think these are great points to have, and I like what you said about this is not just for remote learning, because we sometimes tend to compartmentalize, like these kind of beliefs and practices is only for remote learning, whereas some other set of beliefs and practices are only for in-person learning. But I'm thinking if we can pick out what works for one, and we see why it works so well, and we try to and place it into the other contexts and make that environment a bit more powerful, then why not? Right. So for our participants and viewers, if you have questions, please key in your questions in the comments or in the chat. We already have one question. Fami, are you ready for Q&A, or is there a bit more that you would like to share?
No, okay, the next slide is actually just plans for the future. So I don't have I was assuming the questions will come along the way. So there's no a designated time, so I can answer the question now actually.
Okay. Okay, so let's just read out the question. So the question comes from Q. The question is, how do you get students to be motivated to start remote learning?
Motivated to start remote learning.
Yeah.
I think we do have an understanding of motivation, about giving them autonomy, competence, relevance. But beyond theory, I think how do I give them that motivation? Assuming they are students who are already logged on, but just how do I ensure that they make the most out of the learning experiences that we have prepared for them? Is to possibly differentiate. If you recognize that there are some students who are, the reason behind their lack of motivation could be that at times the activity is too challenging for them. So you may need to differentiate to pitch it at the correct level for them. Some students are not motivated, perhaps because of it's too easy for them as well. So again, differentiation whereby you provide certain alleyways or opportunities for them to explore. So something along those lines. At the end of the day, once we get to know the root cause of why they lack a bit of motivation, a bit of most of the time we can find the solutions based on your teaching experience or your collective teaching experience with your colleagues, and get them to share what they do. course, the answer is somewhere close by normally. Yeah.
So I'm going to jump in here as well. When I was an educator, so what I always tried to do for remote learning was to provide opportunities for student voice and student choice. It's something that I thought I needed to do and make it a lot more obvious and a lot more prominent when it came to remote learning, because it can't just be duplicating what is done in the classroom. And when students know that they have the leeway to make decisions, they have the opportunity to make their voices heard, literally or metaphorically, then they have a lot more ownership over how and what they're learning. And once in a while, I try to add in some fun activities, some fun learning activities. For example, instead of getting them to complete a quiz, I would get them to maybe publish a meme that is based on the concept that they just learned. So it is essentially producing an outcome that is fun, that is humorous. And, I felt the need to keep things light. And this is what would help with the self-motivation. We have another question from Enoch Ng. He's asking, now that we are largely back in school, how can we bring what we've learned from home-based learning or remote learning back to the classroom? So for a lot of countries in the region, right, measures have been eased, maybe not 100% to pre-pandemic levels, but definitely compared to 6 months, 1 year, a year and a half ago, maybe things are a bit more open. So there are more and more schools, more and more countries with in-person learning coming back, even up to 100%. So his question is, how can we bring what we've learned regarding remote learning back to the classroom?
I think if I speak from my own experience, I learned quite a lot about what my students' home situation is like, and I recognize that everyone's home situation is quite unique. At times, we are biased towards our own experience, and therefore, we are not really able to understand the dynamics at home. So, with that in mind, of course, the need to understand or know about my students a bit better, and then subsequently, it's to with that knowledge, that's why I embarked on activities to really in my own way to bridge that inequality, whereby some students are well versed with managing their learning, whereas other students may not. So as much as we are teaching the content, I look at teaching them how to learn for my subject, how to learn in general. So I started to have more self-talk, whereby I'm not that I'm no longer asking questions about how do I improve my teaching and learning in history, but how do I empower my students to learn better? Because I feel that it's something that is more lasting as well. And I do envision in future that the students, as much as they will have face-to-face, but somewhere down the line, they will need to still manage their learning digitally, because maybe it's an overseas program whereby they're learning something remotely from Singapore, and the lecturer or the professor is elsewhere. So how do they actually manage themselves? So for me, things I do in class, I do have that anticipation that learning looks quite different in time to come. Yeah.
I think what's really unique about your experience is that a lot of the things that you've been doing since the long period of remote learning stem from precisely that remote learning experience. So for a lot of educators, when remote learning is done, they literally just, okay, we're done. Now it's back to business. But I'm very certain there must have been some good practices for remote learning. So I think that's where you come in very powerfully. You are not just looking at, okay, this is remote and this is in person, but you're looking at what was it that needed to be done for remote learning, and what can I continue to do? Things like the management of the self-efficacy, getting them to think how they're learning. I think that's something that I can learn from. I need to think more about that as well. So thank you for sharing that. If we have any further questions, please go ahead and type in the chat. So meanwhile, Fami, share with us the last bit about what are the plans for the future.
Oh yeah, okay. So essentially, it's to find meaningful ways to collaborate. I think the opportunity is there. I think the digital divide is a problem, but it's also an opportunity to actually make improvements. So I think something to explore. I'm not saying I'm promised to do it, but possibly to look into how to engage parents who want to help their child manage the learning for history at home. They want to learn together with the child, but they don't know how to. So what resources are there in the area? It's quite a niche area, I suppose, but to engage with parents to put some resources out there so that they want to work with their child, they want to be a supportive partner. So maybe some resources along those lines, things that they can do at their own time. Yeah. So that's something I thought would be quite useful. I have not ventured into it yet, but it was something that occurred to me during remote learning as well. What could the parents do to support their child? Because the child is right there. They want to do something about it, but they don't know how to go about it for history. And this is quite subject specific. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. I would like to thank you once again for joining us. And what's going to happen is that a month from now, next month, we're going to have another guest, and we'll be talking about a self-paced classroom. So if you can imagine students in your class making decisions on how fast or how much they are learning for that day, for that period, for that week. And how do you put all this together? The logistics, the thinking, the pedagogy. If you would like to join us, please scan the QR code. It's going to be at the same time, 3:30. It's going to be on a Thursday as well, and we look forward to seeing you there. So Fahmi, thanks again.
Thank you, Imran.
How has the school term been for you? I hope it's been okay.
I just came back from a term-long sabbatical, so to speak. So it's been okay. I think my colleagues, if they are out there watching, they're making it very easy for me to just blend in. Yeah,
I hope it continues to be that way for the rest of the term. And for the
Me too.
teachers who are joining us, I hope the rest of your term goes smoothly as well. Thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you soon. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.